The day started with some talk about the timetables again, and there was a plan to switch around the dates for non-water ecology with culture and heritage. This draft version lasted until at least lunchtime, but lo and behold, when we came back after lunch, it was changed once more, and frankly now I'm not clear at all about the timetable. I imagine I'm not the only one. The timetable is important for us, the third parties, as we have to fly in our expert witnesses from abroad. We have already lost one set of airfares from the US due to timetable changes. And also there are folk in our group who have given up all of their holiday leave for this year to be able to attend the public inquiry. They've no wiggle room left. So they do not want the public inquiry to continue in September, preferring that it continues April 2027 when their new holiday leave for the year opens up. Listening to the arguments around the timetable drone on and on, I was imagining a scenario where the Commission and all of the departments, the applicants and all of their people cross the room and physically swap shoes with the third parties. Imagine them sitting in our chairs in the auditorium. Imagine them living our lives in houses close to the mine. I see them in my mind's eye, them being told this is your home now. Imagine them not being able to get into their cars and simply drive comfortably and carelessly away, but to be trapped here forever in our lives, having decisions made about their lives that they have little or no control over. I want to ask them, what would they do in our circumstances? Would they continue to be polite about not being able to participate in the public inquiry as the timetable and the narrative becomes rigged for exclusion? Would they just sit quietly, accept the monstrosity of a mine, plonked into the centre of their world? Would they build their big fancy houses that I imagine they live in close proximity to the mine? Would they send their children to a school that was overlooked by mine tailings waste facility? Would they become angry and upset at the fractures created in their communities? What would they see? What would they experience? What would they feel? How would they cope with the heavy blanket of anxiety and desperation? What would they do? Such were my thoughts during the timetable discussions today. Anyways, I guess we better move on, as we actually struggled with many other questions today as well. Another topic early in the day was the Section 76 agreement, which we were just about to start on when Cormac McAleer brought the attention of the Commission to a new document published in January 2026 called the Commonwealth Model Mining Feasibility Study Guidelines. What a mouthful. Which he believed is relevant to the public inquiry and should be considered as part of the evidence base. Cormac explained that, to date, Dalradian have not produced a feasibility study publicly, or at least none that we've seen present during proceedings. If this new evidence is accepted, it raises important questions for the Department for Infrastructure around standards, assessments, frameworks and the adequacy of evidence currently before the inquiry. If rejected, many people will inevitably ask what that means for public confidence in the inquiry process itself, particularly where potentially relevant evidence and international guidance are concerned. So what is the purpose of a feasibility study? To quote from the publication, a feasibility study is not simply a technical or financial document. It is the first and most important step in deciding whether a mining project should go ahead. It tests whether a proposed project is realistic, responsible and aligned with national development priorities. Without rigorous feasibility studies, governments risk granting approvals to projects that may be unsuitable, fail to deliver expected benefits, or create disproportionate social and environmental costs. The Commission has reserved its position on whether the document and associated guidelines will be accepted into the inquiry process, saying they would let us know in the morning. At least I think that's what they said. Right, so back to Section 76. What is it? The key aspects of it are: it enables councils to enter into a legally binding voluntary agreement with landowners, developers to secure obligations necessary to make a development acceptable. And these agreements are often used for infrastructure contributions and must be completed before planning permission is issued. This agreement will probably be between Dalradian, Crown Estate and DFI, and will include a bond of money to be held by Dalradian in one of their accounts, equivalent to about 20 million. There was a discussion around if this would be enough to maintain a site in perpetuity. But merry old Mr. Merry, speaking for Dalradian, did not accept that it was a perpetuity situation, or that a 1 in 10,000 year catastrophe event was likely to occur. Dr. Brian Garvey, I think, concluded that statement by saying, "Sure, that's like saying the Titanic was unsinkable." Around about now, the conversation kept drifting off towards the so-called dry stack facility, which of course we all know by now is a marketing term for mine waste tailings toxic dump. Over the course of the morning, what became glaringly obvious was the more the commissioners tried to reduce each question down to one narrow area, in a classic example of reductionist thinking, the more the connections to other areas continued to emerge and expand. In many instances, it became almost impossible and at times ridiculous to discuss one aspect in isolation without acknowledging the wider interconnected issues, simply in order to stay within the procedural boundaries set by the Commission. Finally, a third-party comment on the Section 76 noted that if Dalradian does sign the agreement, they actually don't have any assets, as Wheaton owns everything, leaving Dalradian as a mere shell company. And to find out more about this, listen to the podcast from last week. I'll put the links in the show notes. We moved on then to agriculture, and we had Paul Hollywood speaking about his anxieties about the future of his farm and his son's livelihoods, as their farm is right next door to the mine. Followed by Linda Sullivan speaking about living in South America near a gold mine and witnessing the distress of cows whose health had been severely impacted by drinking water from the mine. Dermot Devlin, another resident, spoke about the importance of clean air for his health, explaining how long it had taken him to find a treatment that finally allowed him to breathe easily. He described how significantly his health is affected whenever air quality deteriorates. I spoke myself about Pat and Nuala Gagan and the horrific experience they endured with their farm animals and how both their own health and well-being of their family had been profoundly impacted. And check out their podcast in the link in the show notes as well. Darina Fife also spoke about the food industry in Northern Ireland, noting that the Balmoral show is currently taking place, a major showcase for agriculture and food producers across the region. She raised important questions about what impact the proposed mine could have on agricultural produce, food quality and the reputation of Northern Ireland's farming and food sector. The afternoon started with a deposition from Tara Mine ex-employees about how wonderful everything was down at the mine in Navan, in stark contrast to what we've been told by the organisation called SENT, representatives who tell quite a different story. Other afternoon discussions included turbary rights, which Mr. Beattie, the counsel for Dalradian, went to some pains to explain what they were to the Welly-wearing sheep farmers. Prices of houses, we are told, are not considered to be of material consideration by the applicant. I wondered if they lived in them themselves, would they then consider them a material consideration? We had mental health mansplained to us by a Mr. Baroni, expert witness for the applicant. Through a series of questions, we discover all of his research is via a tabletop exercise. That is to say, no primary research done. But it's all fine and dandy, because there are no receptors. He essentially dismissed mental health issues in relation to the mine. Fidelma O'Kane, Bill Donnelly, Dr. Chris O'Connell all answered Baroni's observations with their lived experiences both here and across the world. This question came to a close with Mary Brawley's observations that local people are receptors, suffering harassment, intimidation, anxiety, sleepless nights, all in relation to the mine. And right now, I've run out of energy, so I'm bringing this podcast to a halt, and I'll see you all tomorrow.